darkness, truths unravel. Welcome to Dark Room Narratives, where every story leaves a shadow.
Welcome, intrepid listener. Tonight, reality itself blurs, and the deepest fears hide within the fog. This is where your journey continues. Can you trust your own mind?
The landing in Tokyo was an uneasy interlude, a return to noisy, crowded reality after the mystical calm of the Himalayan peaks. Taras and Lina, holding hands, exited the airport terminal, their backpacks feeling lighter now, containing only one new artifact. Although the Eye of the Eternal Storm and the Gromovitsa were securely stored, the sense of responsibility had multiplied. Lina ran her fingers over the amulet around her neck, feeling its steady pulse, indicating a constant connection to ancient forces. After the events in the monastery, where the eye was activated, her visions became clearer and her intuition sharper. She no longer doubted her and Taras's roles as descendants of ancient priests called to restrain the entity. Taras himself had changed. The cut on his arm from the eye's activation had healed completely, but the memory of the pain and the power they had unleashed remained. He had become more composed, his reaction sharpened, and the skepticism that had been his anchor in the beginning had almost vanished, replaced by a cold resolve. Tokyo's cityscape, with its endless skyscrapers and neon glow, was a stark contrast to the ancient sanctuaries they had left behind. This civilization, hurtling forward in its technological development, had no idea of the dark forces slumbering beneath the surface, or the chaos that threatened to engulf everything. Lina unfolded the map on the Gromovitsa, and the runes on it flared brightly, pointing to their next destination, Aokigahara Forest. Rumors of Aokigahara preceded them, the suicide forest, a place where, according to legend, thousands of souls wander, and where a crushing silence reigns. It's a place where compasses go haywire, and light never penetrates the dense canopy. For them, it was not just a place to find an artifact, but an entrance to a dimension where reality intertwines with illusions. The artifact, the blade of the phantom forest, a dagger that, according to prophecy, could cut the entity's connections, sounded like a weapon far beyond anything they had encountered before. This was a shift from containment to active confrontation. Lina felt that this would be a test of their minds and wills, not just physical strength. They rented a car and within a few hours reached the foothills of Mount Fuji. Aokigahara Forest met them with a piercing silence, a heavy blanket descending upon everything. Even the wind made no sound in the trees, creating an eerie, oppressive atmosphere. The trees grew so densely that sunlight barely penetrated, leaving the forest in perpetual, unsettling twilight. The ground was covered in thick moss that concealed roots and stones, making every step treacherous. The amulets around their necks reacted differently than before. They didn't pulse with warmth, but felt cold, as if draining life energy. This was not just an anomalous place, it was a place steeped in despair and death. They moved deeper into the forest, holding hands, their flashlights carving thin beams into the almost impenetrable darkness. Every step was cautious. The compasses in their hands spun helplessly, confirming the legends of magnetic anomalies that supposedly explained why so many people got lost here. But they knew better. This wasn't magnetic fields, it was the influence of something else. The Gromovitsia in Taras's backpack was silent, as if nature itself held its breath in terror. The eye of the eternal storm, which Lina carried in a special pouch, pulsed faintly, as if trying to stabilize the chaotic surrounding energy. They walked, and a barely audible whisper permeated the air, sounding like hundreds of voices speaking at once. It was an incomprehensible, manipulative noise that created a sense of presence but offered no clear direction, threatening to engulf their minds. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness ahead. It was translucent, with blurred outlines, and resembled a young woman in a traditional Japanese kimono. Her face was contorted with grief, and her eyes were empty. This was a Yurei, the ghost of a person who had died a violent death or with great sorrow. She did not attack, but slowly extended her hand toward them, as if inviting them to join her eternal despair. The air around her turned piercingly cold, and Taras felt his own thoughts begin to cloud, and his desire to move forward vanish. These were illusions, just as the prophecy had warned. Lina grabbed Taras's hand, feeling his consciousness blur. "Don't look into her eyes, Taras. It's a trap," she cried, her voice seemingly barely breaking through the thick, oppressive mist that had suddenly engulfed them from all sides. The phantom figure of the Yurei reaching out was not the only threat in Aokigahara forest. Lina felt her mind beginning to unravel under the influence of illusions emanating from the very air. The voices whispering from all directions were so quiet, yet so piercing, that they seemed to penetrate directly into the brain. "Hold on to me!" Lina cried to Taras, clutching his hand. She focused on the pulsing of the amulet around her neck. It was cold, but its coldness seemed to ground her, helping her resist the manipulative influence of the forest. Taras, his eyes momentarily glassy, shuddered, and his gaze focused on Lina. What was that?" he whispered, his face pale. The Yurei slowly retreated, dissolving into the shadows of the trees, as if its only task was to sow confusion. But others took its place. From the depths of the forest, from behind the trees, new figures began to emerge. Not Yurei, but other yokai, nature spirits twisted by the dark energy of the forest. Some resembled small children with giant heads, others bizarre hairy beasts with glowing eyes. They moved silently, their outlines shimmering as if in a fever dream. Their presence evoked not only fear, but also profound disorientation. Taras's compass spun helplessly, and Lina's phone's GPS showed a complete lack of signal. Aokigahara forest didn't just confuse them, it actively tried to ensnare them so they would never find their way out. "We have to find the temple!" Lina exclaimed, her voice seeming to barely break through the thick, oppressive mist that had suddenly enveloped them from all sides. She remembered the prophecy. The blade of the phantom forest was hidden in a temple. But which one? She pulled the Gromovitsia from Taras's backpack. Its blue glow, though faint, was the only stable light source in this chaos. The runes on the Gromovitsia, which had pointed to the next artifact, had vanished, but now its surface began to be covered with bizarre patterns, not so much a map as some mental images that appeared in her mind, indicating direction. This was a dangerous game, for these images could be just as illusory as the forest itself. Taras held his knife, his gaze focused. He felt the air growing colder and the silence more piercing. The yokai approached, their forms blurring, and they seemed to pass through trees as if through smoke. This was not a physical threat, but something far worse, an attack on the mind. Suddenly, Taras felt a sharp pain in his head, as if 1,000 needles had pierced his brain. A vision flashed before his eyes, not his own past, but some alien memory filled with despair and horror. He saw a young woman wandering in the forest, her face contorted with fear. She begged for help, but her voice caught in her throat. Then a shadow appeared, not like the ones they had fought, but larger, with eyes as black as an abyss, consuming the light. This shadow swallowed the woman, leaving only emptiness. The vision ended as abruptly as it began, and Taras cried out, clutching his head. "Illusions!" Lina exclaimed, realizing he was experiencing a psychic attack. She gripped the Gromovitsia tightly, and a short but powerful pulse of blue light erupted from it, scattering the nearest yokai. The amulet around her neck flared, and she felt her blood reacting to the blade of the phantom forest. The prophecy stated that this artifact required Taras's blood specifically for activation. Perhaps that's why the forest was trying so hard to break him. It was an attempt to cut them off from their source of power, to divide, to weaken. They were not just travelers, they were targets. They moved on, Lina holding the Gromovitsia as a beacon, and Taras, though stunned, stayed close, his gaze firm. They knew that every shadow, every whisper in the forest was an attempt to mislead them, to plunge them into despair. The illusions grew stronger. They saw their relatives calling them from the darkness, heard the voices of friends pleading for help. But they remembered Yarina's words. Your blood is your strongest charm and your greatest weapon. They had to trust their intuition and strength. A beam of light from the Gromovitsia pointed to a small path leading to a high rocky slope. Ahead, the outlines of moss-covered stone gates, looking like the entrance to a temple, loomed. This was their destination. The moss-covered stone gates of the temple loomed before Taras and Lina, their outlines barely visible through the thick mist swirling around them. The forest's whispers intensified, turning into a deafening chorus of voices attempting to penetrate their minds, invoking visions of fear and despair. The yokai, the spirits pursuing them, were no longer merely distorting reality, but materializing, their bizarre forms emerging from the fog, causing the air around them to grow heavy. "This is the entrance," Lina whispered, her voice hoarse with tension. She clutched the Gromovitsia tightly, which, though silent, emitted a stable blue glow that slightly dispelled the illusions. Taras felt his amulet pulse hotly around his neck, as if trying to resist the oppressive energy of the forest. His head still hummed from the recent vision, but he focused on Lina, on her resolve. He knew that the blade of the phantom forest, the next artifact, awaited them inside. The prophecy stated that his blood was needed for its activation, and perhaps that explained why the forest was so desperately trying to break him. They stepped towards the gates, which were massive, carved from black stone. On their surface were intricate, bizarre symbols, not Buddhist, but older, resembling the ornate patterns they had seen on the trees. As soon as their fingers touched the cold stone of the gates, they trembled and slowly began to part with a creak, revealing a dark passage. But beyond it was not just a dark room, it was a labyrinth. The corridors inside were narrow, and the walls were covered with dense, velvety moss that absorbed all sound. The air here seemed older than time, saturated with the smell of damp earth and ancient energy.
From their first steps, Taras and Lina felt the illusions intensify. They saw flickering shadows, heard whispers calling their names, and felt the corridor walls seemingly move, threatening to crush them. Taras's compass once again spun wildly, and the flashlight beams could not dispel the oppressive darkness, only creating new, bizarre shadows. Lina focused on her amulets. The eye of the eternal storm in her backpack pulsed faintly, attempting to stabilize the astral currents, while the Gromavitsia in her hands emitted a faint but constant glow that dispelled the nearest illusions. She intuitively understood that they needed to trust not their eyes, but their inner feeling. She remembered Yarina's words that their blood was not just a key, but a charm. This was their only guide in this labyrinth of lies. Suddenly, one of the corridors, previously empty, abruptly filled with figures. These were not Yurei, but bizarre, almost comical figures, resembling old men with giant mouths and twisted limbs. Tengu, ancient Japanese nature spirits residing in mountains and forests, known for their manipulative abilities. The Tengu did not attack physically, but their presence intensified the illusions, plunging the mind into a deep nightmare. They dissolved and reappeared, their distorted faces popping out of the darkness, mocking them. Taras felt his consciousness begin to shut down again, and fear turned into complete despair. Before his eyes, Lina appeared, but her face was distorted, her voice whispering words of betrayal. It was a masterful illusion. "Lina, it's not you!" Taras cried, trying to break through the gloom. He stepped back, his hand involuntarily touching the amulet around his neck, and it flared, causing a short, sharp pain in his head. This pain, paradoxically, dispelled the illusion, and he saw the real Lina before him, her face filled with concern. "It's them, Tengu. They're manipulating minds," Lina cried, realizing what was happening. She aimed the Gromavitsia at the Tengu, but the blue light passed through them without causing harm. They were not physical beings, but spirits that fed on psychic energy. Lina remembered Yarina saying that blood could be both a weapon and a charm. She decided to try something risky, but perhaps the only way out. She ran her finger over the runes on the Gromavitsia that had appeared after the Eye of the Storm's activation. The runes flared for a second, and a vision of an ancient scroll describing a ritual against Tengu flashed in her mind. Blood, shed with intent for purification, will reveal the truth. Lina knew that Taras's blood was needed specifically for the blade of the Phantom Forest. She was sure it was connected.
Lina's cry, "Tengu, they're manipulating minds!" echoed through the thick mist that enveloped them in the labyrinth. Taras, feeling his head clear after the illusion attack, squeezed her hand. They both understood that physical force was useless against these spirits that fed on despair. They had to find the blade of the Phantom Forest. Lina remembered the vision of an ancient scroll that appeared after touching the runes on the Gromavitsia. It spoke of blood shed with intent for purification that would reveal the truth against the Tengu. She knew that Taras's blood was the key to activating the blade. "We have to get to the center," she shouted, trying to overcome the whispers that filled the corridors. They moved forward, Lina leading, holding the Gromavitsia, which emitted a faint but stable blue light. Taras stayed behind, his amulet on his neck pulsing, helping him resist the illusions. Tengu appeared from all sides, their bizarre faces popping out of the darkness, transforming into their worst nightmares. They saw deceased friends blaming them for their deaths, heard the voices of their relatives pleading for help from non-existent traps. It was a relentless attack on their minds, threatening to drive them insane. But each time an illusion became too real, Taras squeezed the amulet, and the pain helped him return to reality.
The labyrinth proved to be more complex than they thought. Corridors constantly shifted, walls moved, and passages that seemed to lead in one direction suddenly brought them back to the starting point. "This is impossible," Taras muttered, his voice filled with despair. But Lina, despite the despondency, did not lose her resolve. She closed her eyes and focused on her senses. The amulets on her neck and in her backpack, the eye of the eternal storm, reacted to the energy fluctuations. Her blood, the blood of the line, gave her a strange internal map. She knew that the blade of the phantom forest was hidden in a place where pain and despair were strongest, but where there was also hope. Suddenly, Lina felt a sharp, piercing cold that chilled her to the bone. It wasn't just a physical sensation. It was a feeling of absolute emptiness emanating from one of the niches in the wall. She opened her eyes and saw that the niche, previously empty, now contained a dark, glistening dagger. It was forged from black metal, and its blade seemed to absorb light. This was the blade of the phantom forest. On its hilt were engraved the same intricate, manipulative symbols as on the trees in the forest. It seemed that the dagger was not just a weapon, but the embodiment of the darkness of this place itself. The Tengu rushed towards them. Their voices wailed, the illusions intensified, trying to push them away from the artifact. "This is it," Lina whispered, her voice filled with awe and horror. She reached out for the dagger, but her amulet suddenly flared and burned her palm, as if warning her. "It doesn't accept my blood. It's waiting for you, Taras." Taras looked at the dagger. He felt his already healed hand wound pulse with pain again. This was their confirmation. He knew he would have to go through it again, shed blood. The Tengu wailed, their forms blurred, and they merged into one huge, distorted figure, resembling a warrior with empty eyes. It was their last desperate assault to prevent them from possessing the blade. Taras nodded resolutely. He drew his knife and without hesitation deeply cut his palm. Blood gushed, bright and warm, and he pressed it to the hilt of the blade of the phantom forest. The dagger flared with a bright, blinding light that cut through the darkness of the labyrinth. The Tengu shrieked, not from pain, but from pure, unbearable agony. Their forms began to disintegrate, not like smoke, but like shattered glass, scattering into thousands of tiny fragments. The illusions dissipated, and the labyrinth changed, revealing the true corridors. New runes appeared on the blade. They were not just symbols, but a clear map leading out of the labyrinth and pointing to their next destination, Egypt. The blade of the phantom forest was activated, and it severed the connections of the forest spirits. The blade of the phantom forest, glowing with an ominous black light, lay in Taras's hand. The illusions had dissipated, and the labyrinth, which had previously seemed endless, now revealed its true, static corridors. The Tengu, the spirits that had manipulated their minds, had scattered, leaving behind only a sense of emptiness. The victory was bittersweet, as it came at the cost of pain and near complete despair. Taras, his palm bleeding, felt a strange, cold warmth from the dagger. It was not just a weapon, but a tool that could sever the entity's connections. The map that had emerged on the blade pointed to their next destination, the distant sands of Egypt. "We did it!" Lina exhaled, her voice trembling with relief. They moved out of the labyrinth, guided by the blade. The corridors led them to the exit, where they were met by Aokigahara forest, which now seemed strangely calm, almost silent. The mist had cleared, and sparse sunbeams penetrated through the tree canopy, trying to dispel the perpetual twilight. The Yurei, ghosts of the deceased, no longer appeared, as if the energy that sustained them had been severed by the blade. Taras and Lina walked, feeling a heavy burden lift from their shoulders. This was the first direct victory over an aspect of the entity, not just its containment. They understood that each artifact had its unique function in the struggle, and the blade of the phantom forest was a tool for active assault. Upon leaving the forest, they found their rented car. The daylight seemed too bright and the sounds of civilization too loud after the silence of Aokigahara. They stopped at the nearest town to rest and resupply. Taras tended to his cut hand, although it had almost completely healed thanks to their unusual blood. Lina wrapped the blade of the phantom forest in thick cloth and placed it next to the Gromovitsa and the Eye of the Eternal Storm in a specially equipped backpack. Each artifact now seemed not just an object, but a living organism, pulsing with its own energy, interacting with the others. Taras and Lina spent their evening studying the new runes on the blade, trying to understand their meaning. The runes resembled ancient, forgotten hieroglyphs, pointing to a specific location in Egypt, the Giza pyramids. But it wasn't just a tourist spot. The blade indicated the sands of eternity, a hidden place beneath the pyramids, of which there was no mention in official sources. Lina remembered her vision of the 7 nodes and artifacts that formed a circle to contain chaos. Each artifact was connected to a specific element. The blade of the phantom forest was linked to air and death, capable of severing immaterial connections. Their journey to Egypt was long, but now they moved with greater confidence. They were no longer the naive treasure hunters who had set out for the forgotten city. They were experienced travelers who knew about the dangers of the secret world that existed alongside the ordinary one. The amulets around their necks pulsed constantly, as if guiding them and protecting them from unknown threats. Lina often talked to Taras about her visions, about the connection of their blood to the ancient priests who created this network of protection. She believed that the blade of the phantom forest had given them not only a weapon, but a deeper understanding of chaos, their true enemy. Their arrival in Cairo was a shock to their senses, the heat, the noise, and the smell of the desert. But the grandeur of the pyramids, towering over the city, was undeniable. The blade of the phantom forest in Taras's backpack vibrated faintly, as if sensing the proximity of a new source of power. Their mission here was to find the hourglass of eternity, an artifact capable of freezing time for the entity. It sounded absolutely incredible, but after all they had been through, they were ready for any surprises. They knew that the pyramids concealed much more than just pharaohs' tombs. The task was clear, but dangerous: to penetrate hidden chambers beneath the pyramids where, according to prophecy, the hourglass awaited, guarded by ancient magic and possibly shadows.
The majestic pyramids of Giza greeted Taras and Lina as a silent testament to ancient power. The air was dry and hot, saturated with the smell of sand and age. Sunbeams mercilessly scorched the earth, creating shimmering waves in the distance. The blade of the phantom forest in Taras's backpack vibrated faintly, as if sensing the proximity of a new source of power. Its black surface seemed to absorb light, remaining a dark core even under the scorching Egyptian sun. Lina ran her hand over the amulet on her neck. It pulsed steadily, but her intuition screamed of danger lurking beneath the magnificent monuments. "Sands of eternity," she whispered, looking at the endless dunes stretching to the horizon. The map that had emerged on the blade pointed to a specific location beneath one of the pyramids, a hidden chamber unknown to modern archaeologists. They decided to act cautiously, posing as ordinary tourists visiting the Giza pyramids. The crowds of people, the hum of voices, the flashes of cameras, all of it created an illusion of safety. But Taras and Lina felt something sinister beneath the surface. They waited until nightfall, when the tourist buses had departed and the desert plunged into an eerie silence, broken only by the whistling wind and the distant howling of jackals. The night air was cold, and the sand crunched underfoot. They were dressed in light but durable modern tactical clothing that allowed them to blend into the night landscape. Guided by the ring of mists, which now glowed with a clear silvery light, they moved towards the base of the Great Pyramid. The artifact indicated a small, barely noticeable opening, hidden behind a pile of stones and sand, which was undoubtedly not part of official archaeological excavations. The air at the entrance was cold, despite the daytime heat. This was not just an entrance to a tomb, but a portal to a place where time and reality obeyed other rules. The amulets around their necks pulsed more intensely, warning of the proximity of a powerful energy node. Upon entering, they found themselves in a narrow, dusty tunnel. The air was stale, saturated with the smell of ancient dust and forgotten secrets. The ring of mists in Lina's hand continued to glow, casting long, bizarre shadows on the walls. The tunnel led them deeper, and soon they heard a low, drawn-out sound, like the buzzing of millions of metallic insects. Taras recalled tales of sand demons called Habib al-Rimmel, lovers of the sand, creatures that emerged from the desert and could consume life. This was their new trial.
Thousands of shadow scarabs surged towards Lina and Taras, their buzzing filling the chamber like an ominous swarm. The blade of the phantom forest in Taras's hand glowed black, slicing the attacking insects into black dust, but their numbers seemed endless. The sand beneath their feet, previously only a thin layer, began to stir, and more scarabs erupted from it, threatening to bury them alive. Lina, clutching the eye of the eternal storm, desperately tried to reach the hourglass of eternity lying on the pedestal. "We have to get to it," she shouted to Taras, but her voice was lost in the deafening buzz. Taras fought back with the blade, but the scarabs were everywhere. They crawled over his clothes, trying to get under his skin. He felt his strength draining, and the shadow scarabs became denser. These creatures were not just physical. They had the ability to penetrate the mind, causing panic and despair. Lina, in an instant, felt the amulet around her neck pulse hotly, and the blood on her cut hand began to burn. She remembered the prophecy Yurei had spoken, and understood that her blood was necessary for the activation of the hourglass of eternity. This was their only chance to stop this endless onslaught. She lunged forward, fighting her way through the swarms of shadow scarabs that bit her exposed skin. The pain was scorching, but Lina ignored it, her gaze fixed on the hourglass of eternity. Taras, seeing her determination, covered her with the blade of the phantom forest, his strikes precise, but becoming fewer as fatigue set in. Finally, Lina reached the pedestal. She drew Taras's knife and, without hesitation, deeply slashed her palm. Blood gushed, bright and warm, and she pressed it to the surface of the hourglass of eternity. The golden grains of sand inside the bowls began to emit a bright, dazzling light. The chamber shook, and a powerful pulse of energy erupted from the hourglass of eternity. Thousands of shadow scarabs that had swarmed them wailed in pain. They did not disintegrate into dust or freeze in time, but froze in place, as if suspended in time, their glowing eyes extinguished. The stirring sand suddenly became motionless. Time for the entity in this chamber was frozen. Lina felt the hourglass's energy flow into her, clearing her mind of panic and fatigue. It was an amazing power, the ability to stop time for immaterial threats, rendering them powerless. Taras, freed from the scarabs that had covered him, lowered the blade of the phantom forest. His breathing was heavy, but a smile of relief appeared on his face. "You did it," he gasped, looking at the frozen sworn. The hourglass of eternity in Lina's hands glowed with a soft golden light, its magical sand flowing slower than ever. New runes began to appear on its surface, forming an intricate pattern. Lina ran her finger over them, and her eyes widened at a new vision. She saw an ancient pharaoh standing in the same chamber, his hands raised to the sky, and the same shadow scarabs swirling around him. He did not fight them, but controlled them, using the hourglass as a tool of power. The vision shifted. She saw this pharaoh blinded by thirst for control, trying to use the hourglass not only for protection, but also for manipulating the shadows themselves, attempting to make them his army. But the entity, hiding behind the shadows, proved stronger. It consumed him, and his soul became part of these scarabs, condemned to guard the hourglass forever. The pharaoh, now a spirit, warned, "This artifact is not for control, but for stopping. Do not try to manipulate that which seeks to consume you, or your fate will be mine." The vision faded, leaving Lina with a deep understanding of the danger posed by the lust for power.
The hourglass of eternity in Lina's hands glowed with a soft golden light, its magical sand barely perceptibly flowing, holding the shadow scarabs in a state of eternal stillness. The chamber beneath the pyramids, which moments ago had been filled with a terrifying buzzing and an endless onslaught, now plunged into an eerie silence. Taras, his face pale but with triumph in his eyes, lowered the blade of the phantom forest. He felt a heavy burden lift from his shoulders, for they had managed to acquire another artifact. Lina, her palms still bleeding, felt the hourglass's energy flow into her, clearing her mind of the psychic pressure the scarabs had created. "We did it," she whispered, looking at the frozen swarm clinging to the walls and floor. The pharaoh's lesson was learned. Power over chaos leads to destruction. Only containment offers a chance for survival. New runes emerging on the hourglass of eternity radiated a soft golden light. Lina ran her finger over their surface, and a brief but clear vision flashed in her mind. She saw a picturesque island, shrouded in thick mists, where strange stone circles resembling ancient sanctuaries loomed. Next to these circles, in a swirl of mist, a figure resembling a huge, amorphous shadow appeared. The inscription on the runes was indistinct, but Lina intuitively understood that this was Scotland, the Isle of Skye. The next artifact, the Ring of Mists, awaited them there. It had the ability to hide from the entity, indicating a new strategy in the battle. They were shifting from direct destruction and freezing to concealment, suggesting the enemy's growing power. Taras and Lina hurried to the chamber's exit. The hourglass of eternity in Lina's hands emitted a constant but not overly bright golden glow that served as their guide in the dark corridors. The blade of the phantom forest in Taras's backpack, now much quieter as if its work was done, still gave off a slight chill. They quickly passed through the dusty tunnels where there was no longer any buzzing of scarabs or their oppressive presence. Emerging onto the surface, they were met by the cold of the night desert. The moon brightly illuminated the majestic pyramids standing silently under the starry sky. They quickly reached their rented car, their hearts pounding from their ordeal. The drive back to Cairo was calm, but Taras and Lina's thoughts were far from peaceful landscapes. They discussed new discoveries, the connection between the artifacts, and the growing threat. Lina told Taras about the pharaoh's vision and his failed attempt to control the shadows. "Each artifact has its purpose, Taras, and each of them can be dangerous if we try to use it for anything other than its intended purpose." She also shared her understanding that chaos, their true enemy,
was far older and more powerful than they could imagine. They spent the next few days in Cairo, resting, gathering information, and preparing for their journey to Scotland. They bought warm clothes, knowing that the climate on the Isle of Skye would be entirely different. The blade of the phantom forest, the hourglass of eternity, the eye of the eternal storm, and the gromovitsa were now stored in a single, specially equipped container that Taras securely fastened in his backpack. He felt all the artifacts pulsing in unison, creating a powerful, though invisible, energy field. These were their tools, their weapons, their protection. Their flight to Scotland was long. Outside the plane window, desert landscapes gave way to green fields, and then to rugged mountains. Lina looked at the map that had appeared on the hourglass of eternity. It was more detailed than the previous ones, showing patterns of wind, mists, and hidden energy nodes. She felt that this would be a journey to a place where reality and myth intertwined even more closely. The Isle of Skye, with its Celtic legends and mystical atmosphere, awaited them. They knew that new challenges lay ahead, new spirits, and perhaps even more powerful guardians. But Taras and Lina were ready. Each step made them stronger, and they were resolute in completing their ancestors' task.
The flight to Australia was long. Taras and Lina, consistently recognizable by their faces and age, dressed in lightweight modern desert adventure gear, were on the final leg of their grand journey. They sat by the window, watching as the icy landscapes of Antarctica gave way to endless ocean expanses, and then to the scorched, vibrant red deserts of the Australian outback. In their specially designed container, all 6 artifacts now resided: the gromovitsa, the eye of the eternal storm, the blade of the phantom forest, the ring of mists, the hourglass of eternity, and the icy heart. Each pulsed in its unique rhythm, creating a silent symphony of ancient power that resonated deeply with their amulets. Lina ran her fingers over the amulet on her neck, feeling its warm, steady beat, which now merged with the pulsing energy of the entire collection, a profound connection to their shared destiny. Taras looked at the vast red landscape stretching beneath them. His face, though deeply weary, expressed an unwavering resolve that had been forged in countless battles against the unseen. The chilling knowledge of the anthropic vacuum and its relentless urge to return the universe to non-existence was a heavy burden, a constant whisper in the back of his mind. Yet their growing understanding of the harmony of creation, the true vulnerability of chaos, continued to fuel their determination. They knew that Uluru, this immense ancient red monolith rising majestically from the desert, was not merely a natural wonder or a place of aboriginal spiritual power. It was the last crucial energy node in their ancestors' intricate defense network, a sacred nexus where the final piece of their cosmic puzzle awaited. Their arrival in Australia was a stark contrast to the previous, more colder destinations. The heat was relentless, the air dry and thick with the scent of red dust, and the landscape, though harsh, possessed a primordial, breathtaking beauty. They quickly acquired a specialized all-terrain vehicle, its robust frame designed to conquer the unforgiving desert terrain, and set off deep into the vast expanse where the colossal Uluru awaited them. The icy heart, nestled within Lina's backpack, pulsed faintly with a cool blue glow, a strange juxtaposition against the fiery red sand surrounding them. Lina felt an almost palpable resonance as the artifact's energy intertwined with Uluru's ancient power, creating a peculiar and potent connection.
This place, deeply revered as sacred aboriginal land, was steeped in millennia of ancient spirits and profound myths, hinting at a history far deeper than any written record. As they drew closer to Uluru, a palpable tension began to mount, tightening around them like an unseen coil. The colossal rock, dominating the desert horizon, appeared to be alive, its surface shimmering, not just from the oppressive heat, but with a vibrant, ancient energy. Its elongated shadows stretched across the landscape, dark and ominous, whispering tales of forgotten times. An unnerving silence enveloped the area. There wasn't a single living soul in sight, a stillness far more oppressive than the clamor of any bustling city. The amulets on their necks began to pulse even stronger, radiating a distinct chill, as if sounding an urgent, dire warning of an incredibly powerful and inherently dangerous force that lurked just beyond their sight. The ancient prophecies echoed in their minds, speaking of sand demons that fiercely guarded the dust of Uluru, and ominously of the entity attacking, signaling that their ultimate confrontation was now within reach. They waited patiently until the sun began its majestic descent, when Uluru glowed with an otherworldly radiance in the last fiery rays, its color transforming from a brilliant orange to a deep, resonant crimson. The desert night air, though crisp, still carried the lingering heat from the day's relentless sun, the sand beneath their feet subtly radiating warmth. Guided by the icy heart, which now pulsed with a bright, unwavering blue light, illuminating their path with an ethereal glow, they moved purposefully towards the colossal rock's base. The artifact precisely indicated a small, barely visible opening, cunningly concealed behind an ancient accumulation of stones and shifting sand, a passage that was undeniably not part of any modern archaeological record. The air at the entrance was chillingly cold, a stark contrast to the recent daytime heat, suggesting it was more than just a natural crevice. This was clearly not merely an entrance to a geological formation, but a profound portal to a realm where ancient spirits and the primal energies of the very earth intricately intertwined with the pervasive, encroaching influence of chaos. When they moved into the opening, they found themselves in a narrow, dimly lit spiral tunnel, its curving walls seemingly pressing in on them. The air within was dry and heavy, saturated with the unmistakable scent of antiquity and raw, unrefined minerals. The icy heart, clutched firmly in Lina's hand, continued to glow with its steady blue light, casting strange shimmering shadows that danced eerily across the tunnel's walls, which were adorned with intricate, faded aboriginal paintings. These ancient artworks depicted winding serpentine forms, primal animal figures, and abstract mystical patterns, hinting at a deep spiritual history of this sacred place. The tunnel led them deeper into the Earth's core, and soon a low, drawn-out hum began to emanate from the very depths of the rock. It was the chilling, unmistakable buzzing of countless insects, but amplified and imbued with a strange, malevolent rhythm, growing louder with every step. Taras immediately felt his amulet begin to heat up, pulsing intensely against his skin, as if sounding an urgent, dire warning of an overwhelmingly powerful and immediate threat that lurked just beyond their sight.
The low, ominous hum intensified as Taras and Lina delved deeper into the spiral tunnels beneath Uluru. It was the chilling, unmistakable buzzing of countless sand demons called Habib al-Rim, lovers of the sand, creatures that emerged from the desert, capable of consuming not only life, but also light.
The icy heart in Lina's hand pulsed with a cool blue light, casting strange, shimmering shadows on the ancient aboriginal paintings that adorned the tunnel walls, depicting primal animal figures and abstract mystical patterns. Taras felt his amulet heat up, vibrating intensely against his skin, confirming the presence of an overwhelmingly powerful and immediate threat. This was it, the final guardian before the last artifact, the dust of Ulamu, and the ultimate confrontation with the very essence of chaos. The tunnel abruptly opened into a vast red-lit natural cavern carved deep within the Earth's core. The air was thick with the scent of hot rock and ozone. And then they saw them, not just a few, but thousands upon thousands of sand demons swarming every inch of the cavern, emerging from cracks in the walls, from beneath the rocky floor, from every conceivable crevice. These were not mere creatures, but amorphous beings made of shifting sand and deep shadows, their eyes glowing with an intense, malevolent red light. And above them, in the very center of the cavern, a colossal, pulsating mass of darkness loomed, absorbing all light, all sound, all hope. This was the direct manifestation of the anthropic vacuum, the primordial force of non-existence, finally revealing itself in its terrifying, raw power. "It's the entity!" Lina cried out, her voice barely audible over the deafening hum of the sand demons. Her mind reeled from the sheer scale of the threat, the cosmic horror of it all. Taras, gripping the blade of the phantom forest, his knuckles white, responded by raising the dark, shimmering dagger. It pulsed with a cold, hungry energy, eager to sever the connections of these monstrous beings. The sand demons surged forward, a tidal wave of shifting forms and glowing red eyes, their collective buzzing rising to an unbearable crescendo. They attacked not just physically, but psychically, their touch attempting to strip away their victims' will, to plunge them into the very essence of despair and non-existence that the vacuum embodied. Taras swung the blade of the phantom forest, its dark glint cutting through the attacking sand demons. Each strike caused the creatures to dissipate into fine black dust, but they reformed almost instantly, as if their very essence was tied to the infinite supply of sand and shadows in the cavern. Lina, meanwhile, clutching the icy heart, desperately tried to push through the relentless onslaught, her gaze fixed on the center of the cavern, where a small, almost imperceptible mound of dust lay on a stone altar. This was the dust of Uluru, the final artifact, the 0 point of creation. The prophecy stated that all 6 artifacts must be placed around it to restore the harmony of creation and finally seal the anthropic vacuum. But the sheer number of demons, their psychic assault, and the overwhelming presence of the colossal vacuum above them made reaching it seem impossible. Lina's amulets pulsed frantically, and a searing pain shot through her, as the anthropic vacuum intensified its direct mental assault, attempting to strip away her will, to make her succumb to utter despair and non-existence that the vacuum embodied. She saw visions of endless nothingness, felt the cold embrace of non-existence threatening to crush her consciousness. But then she remembered Yarina's words, "Your blood is your strongest charm and your greatest weapon." She pushed through the pain, her resolve hardening. She knew that her blood, the blood of the lineage, was the final key. With a surge of desperate energy, she lunged forward, weaving through the swirling demons, her movement swift and precise despite the overwhelming odds. Taras, seeing her desperate charge, bellowed, doubling his efforts to keep the demons at bay, his blade a whirlwind of dark energy, buying her precious seconds. Finally, Lina reached the stone altar, its surface smooth and cool beneath her trembling fingers. She placed the icy heart next to the shimmering mound of dust of Uluru. Then, one by one, with frantic precision, she retrieved the remaining 5 artifacts from Taras's backpack: the Grumovitsa, the Eye of the Eternal Storm, the Blade of the Phantom Forest, the Ring of Mists, and the Hourglass of Eternity. She arranged them in a perfect circle around the dust of Uluru, each artifact beginning to glow with its unique light: blue, green, black, silver, golden, and then the cool blue of the icy heart. As the last artifact was placed, a blinding rainbow-colored beam of pure energy erupted from the combined artifacts, shooting upwards, piercing the colossal manifestation of the anthropic vacuum. The sand demons shrieked, not from pain, but from pure, unbearable agony, their forms disintegrating into harmless dust, vanishing into the air. The colossal anthropic vacuum wailed, its immense form rippling and shimmering, being drawn back into itself, suppressed by the overwhelming harmony. The cycle was complete. The harmony of creation was restored.
If you're still here, it means the shadows didn't scare you away. Subscribe to Darkroom Narratives for more stories that linger long after the lights go out.